Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Sage University. I'm Dr. Sukhwant Singh, professor at Sagar Institute of Research and Technology Pharmacy, which is affiliated to the Sanjeev Agrawal Global Educational University. And I welcome you to today's class, in which today we'll be discussing about the Central Drug Standards Control Organization, that is CDSCO. Now, CDSCO is a department which works under the aegis of Ministry of Health, Government of India, and it is the supreme regulatory body related to the drugs and medical devices. So when we talk about the Drug Regulatory Authority, that is the DRA, it is an agency that develops and implements most of the legislation and regulations on pharmaceuticals. The main task is to ensure the quality, safety, and efficacy of drugs and the accuracy of product information. And this is done by making certain rules that the manufacture, procurement, import, export, distribution, supply and sale of drugs, drug promotion and advertising, and clinical trials are carried out according to specific standards. Unless and until these specific standards are followed, we cannot expect the quality of a supreme nature. That is why these regulatory authorities, they have developed such a system. By following these protocols, one can ensure that the product which is related to this particular department is of the highest quality, of the highest safety, and of the highest efficacy. Now, the functions of regulatory authority are varied. For example, they may deal with the product registration, which includes drug evaluation and authorization and monitoring of drug efficacy and safety. They also deal with the regulation of drug manufacturing, importation, and distribution. They also regulate and control the drug promotion and information. They also take care of the adverse drug reaction monitoring, which is a reporting procedure for the drugs which are having adverse reactions, and produce untoward results. The regulatory authority also takes care of the licensing of premises, licensing of persons, and that of practices. And the main goal of drug regulation is to guarantee the safety, efficacy, and quality of drugs. Now, CDSCO, that is the Central Drugs Standards Control Organization, it is the supreme body of regulation for drugs in India, and it exercises regulatory control over the quality of drugs, cosmetics, and notified medical devices in the country. The CDSCO of India is the main regulatory body for regulation of pharmaceutical, medical devices, and clinical trials. It is the Central Drug Authority for discharging functions assigned to the central government under the Drugs and Cosmetics Act. Its headquarters is located at the FDA Bhavan, Kotla Road, New Delhi, and it functions under the Directorate General of Health Services, that is DGHS, who is the member of Ministry of Health and Family Welfare, Government of India. CDSCO is divided into zonal offices, which does the pre-licensing and post-licensing inspections, post-marketing surveillances, and recalls when they are required. The vision and mission of the CDSCO goes as follows. The vision is to protect and promote the health in India, and mission is to safeguard and enhance the public health by assuring safety, efficacy, and quality of drugs, cosmetics, and medical devices. Now, the person who is responsible for taking care of all the activities of the CDSCO is the Drug Controller General of India, that is DCGI. He or she is responsible for approval of new drugs, medical devices, and clinical trials to be conducted in India. He is appointed by the central government. Under the DCGI, the State Drug Control Organization will be functioning. The DCGI is advised by the Drug Technical Advisory Board, that is DTAB, and Drug Consultative Committee, that is DCC. The DCGI is responsible for handling matters of product approval and approval standards, clinical trials, introduction of new drugs, and import license of new drugs. A drug may be licensed for manufacturing in a state only once it has been approved by the CDSCO. Now, this is the organization chart of the CDSCO, which is directly functioning under the Ministry of Health. The supreme authority in CDSCO is the Drug Controller General of India, who is assisted by Deputy Drug Controllers, who are further assisted by Assistant Drug Controllers of India. There are two divisions under the various assistant drug controllers. The first division is the medical devices division, which is taken care by drug inspectors and technical data associates. Similarly, the another division, that is the diagnostic division, that also is functioned through drug inspectors and technical data associates. Further, if you talk about the various divisions of CDSCO, the Drug Control General of India controls his work through the headquarters, through zonal offices, through sub-zonal office, through the port office, and the testing laboratories. The headquarters look after the new drugs, the CLLAs, the imports, the Drug Technical Advisory Board, and the Consultative Committee. Zonal offices look after the GMP audit, which is done in coordination with the state. Sub-zonal office look after the GMP audits, again with the coordination of states. The port offices, they deal with the import and exports of various drugs and drug-related substances. And lastly, the laboratories, that is the testing laboratories. These carry out the testing of various drug samples and take care of the validation of test protocols, which are carried out across the country. The zonal offices of CDSCO are at Mumbai, Kolkata, Chennai, Ghaziabad, Ahmedabad, and Hyderabad. And these offices work in close collaboration with the state drug control administration and assist them in securing uniform enforcement of the Drug Act and other connected legislations on India basis. These are involved in the GMP audits and inspection of manufacturing units of large volume parenteral, sera, vaccine, and blood products. The sub-zonal offices of CDSCO are at Chandigarh, Jammu, and Bangalore, and these centers coordinate with the state drug control authorities under the jurisdiction for uniform standard of inspection and enforcement of various constituent units. Now, there are certain ports of entry which are controlled by and working in coordination with the CDSCOs. These ports are actually seaports from wherein various imports and exports of drugs and medical devices takes place. So the functions of these port office of CDSCOs is to basically scrutinize the bill of entry with a view to ensure that the imported drugs are complying with the Indian regulations. They also check the shipping bills for export of statistical data and keep control under the regulation. They also ensure that no new drug is imported into the country unless its import is permitted by the drug licensing authorities under the rule 122A and 30AA. They also ensure that small quantities of drugs imported for clinical trials or for personal use are duly permitted under test license 11 or test license 2 or test license 2A, or a permit license as 12B, as the case may be. Because the drugs are actually under tight scrutiny of the CDSCO. Further, the CDSCO port offices also take care for the maintenance of statistics regarding import and export of drugs and cosmetics. They also work in coordination with the custom authorities, and they work in the coordination with the state drug controllers and zonal offices for post-import checks. They also prepare for monthly, quarterly, and annual reports of the imports or exports. And ultimately, their another function is to draw samples for an import or export and re-import consignments. Now, there is another function in the CDSCO, that is the CDTL, that is Central Drug Testing Laboratories. Now, these laboratories were established under the Indian Drug and Cosmetic Act of 1940 and responsible for quality control of drugs and cosmetics in the country. The various CDLs are located across various parts of India, including Kolkata, Mumbai, Chennai, Kasauli, Guwahati, and Chandigarh. The labs at Guwahati and Chandigarh are called as the Regional Drug Testing Laboratories, whereas the other labs are Central Drug Labs. Now, the functions of these laboratories include certain statutory functions and some other functions. The statutory functions include the analytical quality control of majority of imported drugs available in the Indian market. They act as an appellate authority in matters of dispute relating to quality of drugs. They also are responsible for laying down standards of drugs, cosmetic, diagnostic, and devices. They also lay down the regulatory measures, which are amendments to the various acts and rules under the Drug and Cosmetic Act. They also help to regulate the market authorization of new drugs. They also regulate clinical research in India. They also tend to approve the license of manufacture of certain categories of drugs as central licensing approving authority, that is for blood banks, large volume parenterals, vaccines, and sera. The statutory functions also includes to regulate the standard of imported drugs. They help out the Drug Technical Advisory Board and Drug Consultative Committees for various work. They help in testing of drugs by the CDLs. And lastly, they help out for the publication of data in the Indian Pharmacopoeia. The other functions of CDL includes collection, storage, and distribution of international standard reference preparations of drug and pharmaceutical substances. They also carry out training programs for the drug analysts who are deputed by the state drug control laboratories and other institutions. They work to advise the Central Drug Control Administration in respect of quality and toxicity of drugs awaiting license. Their function includes to work out analytical specifications for preparation of monographs for the Indian Pharmacopoeia and the Homeopathic Pharmacopoeia of India. They help the WHO certification schemes. They help to screen the drug formulations which are available in the Indian market. And lastly, evaluation or screening of applications for granting no objection certificate for export of unapproved or banned drugs. Now, the CDSCO, which is located actually in the center of this whole scenario, it has also got certain important functions to be carried out as a whole. The first one is, of course, the approval of new drugs and clinical trials, and coordination of all these trials at various stages is actually reported to the CDSCO. They also look after the import registration and licensing of various pharmaceutical products and cosmetics and medical devices. They also look after the licensing of blood banks, large volume parenterals, vaccines, rDNA products, and some of the medical devices and diagnostic agents. The CDSCO also coordinates for the amendment to the Drug and Cosmetic Acts and Rules. They help in the participation in WHO GMP certification schemes, banning of drugs and cosmetics, grants to test license, personal license, and NOCs for experts, testing of drugs by central labs, publication of Indian Pharmacopoeia, monitoring the ADRs, and lastly, the guidance on technical matters is given by the CDSCO. There are certain responsibilities of the central authority also. For example, they help to initiate in framing of rules, the regulation and guidance documents to match the contemporary issues in compliance with the requirement of Drug and Cosmetic Act of 1940 and rules of 1945. They facilitate in uniform implementation of provisions of Drug and Cosmetic Act of 1940, rules 1945. They function as the central licensing approving authority under the provision of Drug and Cosmetic Act 40 and rules 45. Collaboration with other similar international agencies, for example, MHRA in the UK, or the TGA of Australia, or the INVASA of Brazil, or the FDA of the USA. These are all the competent drug regulatory authorities of the respective countries. For example, MHRA is responsible for the, which acts as the FDA for UK. Similarly, TGA is for the Australia, and similarly, INVASA is for the Brazil. FDA is for the USA. So coordination between these central approving authorities is done in India through the CDSCO. It also helps for providing the training of Indian regulatory personnel. It gives the approval for new drugs, looks after the clinical trials in the country. It also lays down the standard of drugs, control over the quality of imported drugs, coordination of activities of the state drug controlling authority, providing expert advice with view of bringing out uniformity in the enforcement of the Drug and Cosmetic Acts. Now, another very important body which is working under the aegis of CDSCO is the Drug Technical Advisory Board, or the DTAB. Now, DTAB is a body which looks after about all the pros and cons and ins and outs of all the pharmaceutical products, cosmetics, and medical devices. For example, if a new drug comes into the market and its price is to be fixed, or its ADRs are to be studied, or any other technical information regarding it is to be finally scrutinized and publicized, then this DTAB comes into play. Now, there are various ex officio members of the DTAB. The chairman of the DTAB is Director General of Health Services. Then the other members include the Drug Controller of India, Director of the Central Drug Laboratory, Calcutta, Director of Central Research Institute, Kasauli, President of the Medical Council of India, President of the Pharmacy Council of India, and the last ex officio member is Director of Central Drug Research Institute, that is CDRI, Lucknow. Now, the working members are as follows. The first categories of the nominated members of DTAB. 2 persons are nominated by the central government. 1% of the committee is nominated by the central government, who is a prominent member from the pharmaceutical industry, and 2 persons holding the appointment of government analyst under this act. The other positions are actually elected positions, and 5 members are of the elected nature. 1 person is to be elected by the Executive Committee of the Pharmacy Council of India. 1 person is to be elected by the Executive Committee of the Medical Council of India. 1 pharmacologist to be elected by government body of the ICMR, that is the Indian Council of Medical Research. 1 person to be elected by the Central Council of Indian Medical Association. And lastly, 1 person to be elected by the Council of Indian Pharmaceutical Association. The function of this DTAB is to advise the central government and the state government on technical matters and to carry out all the other functions which are assigned to it by this act. Another important committee is the Drug Consultative Committee, that is the DCC. This is also an advisory body which is constituted by the central government. The constitution is of 3 members, wherein 2 representatives, not 3 members, of 2 categories actually, where 2 representatives are from the central government and 1 representative from each of the state governments of the Indian Union. The functions of this DCC is to advise the central government, the state government, and the DTAB on any other matter tending to secure uniformity throughout India in the administration of this act. And there is a separate, the Ayurveda, Siddha and Unani Drug Consultative Committee, which is constituted under Section 33D of the Act. That means that a separate committee exists for the Ayush and a separate committee exists for the these allopathic drugs. Now, the last and important functionary of the CDSCO is the State Drug Control Organization. Now, state drug regulatory authorities basically are called as in different names. For example, in Madhya Pradesh, the body is called as MPFDA. For example, in Telangana, he is called as the Drug Controller of Andhra Pradesh, and a variety of other names are available across India. Basically, they function as the State Drug Regulatory Authorities, or SDRs. These are established under the Drug and Cosmetic Act and are responsible for licensing of manufacturing establishment and sale premises, undertaking inspections of such premises to ensure compliance with the license conditions, drawing samples for testing and monitoring of quality of drugs, taking action like suspension or cancellation of licenses, surveillance over sale of spurious and adulterated drugs, instituting legal prosecution when required, and monitoring of objectionable advertisement of drugs. So state drugs are actually the bodies who are working in the close contact with the social aspects of our pharmaceutical drug distribution chain. And they are responsible for taking care of the quality of drugs which are dispensed to the end user. The State Drug Controller, or the SDSA, he is the head of the SDRA and reports to the Joint Secretary in the Health Department of State Government. A typical SDRA has drug inspectors who report to the Deputy Drug Controller, who also act as the licensing authority of the state. For example, in case of Madhya Pradesh, we have 2 licensing authorities. One is looking after the areas of East, North MP, and the other one is looking after the South, West MP. Now, the administrative matters such as departmental budgeting, appointment, training of officers, and allotment of funds and resources for inspection falls under the jurisdiction of state governments. And this report found that a number of SDRAs were conjoined with the Food Regulatory Department, that is the FDA of the state, making it difficult to clearly demarcate the available funds and resources between the two. And hence, it has been suggested to the state governments time and again that the Food Safety Department and the Drug Safety Department they should always be bifurcated, and they should have their individual funds and resources available to them, so that the food inspectors can work independently and the drug inspectors can work independently. So this is the suggestion which is given to the state governments time and again by the CDSCO, so that a separate state drug control organization could be carved out. So if you look at the organization chart, the drugs controller or the commissioner, which can be either, which is synonymous actually across the different states. For example, in Kerala, we have a drug commissioner, whereas in Telangana or Andhra Pradesh, we have a drug controller. So drug controller commissioner, he works in concoction with the deputy drug controller, who is assisted by the drug inspectors or the assistant drug inspectors, and further supported by the supporting staff. Then the drug testing laboratories, they have a government analyst who is supported by analysts, and lastly, the supporting staff. Now, there are various functions of state licensing authorities. For example, licensing of drug manufacturing and sales establishment in the state is given by the SLAs. Then the licensing of drug testing laboratories, approval of drug formulations for manufacture, monitoring of quality of drug and cosmetics manufactured by respective state units and which are marketed in that particular state. For example, if a drug is given license to be marketed and manufactured in the state of Madhya Pradesh, it cannot stand true for the state of Maharashtra or the state for Rajasthan. They cannot use that license to carry out the sales and manufacturing of the drug in that particular state. Investigation and prosecution in respect of contravention of legal provisions. So if somebody is not following the given set of standards and set of protocols or the SOPs, then of course the contravention has to be done through the state licensing authorities. Then they also carry out certain administrative action, pre and post licensing inspections, and lastly, the recall of substandard drugs. So the drugs that are not following the norms. For example, recently Abbott has called back its thyro norm from the state of Madhya Pradesh and Telangana specifically. They have given out the batch numbers because there was some labeling issue on the packs of thyro norm, and they had to give out 80 mcg of thyro norm, and the label claim was 400 mcg. So as a result, they had to recall the whole batches, and which was advertised and publicized across all the newspapers in the state. Now, the other responsibility of state authorities include manufacturing, sales, distribution of drugs, licensing drug testing laboratories, approving drug formulations for manufacture, carrying out pre and post licensing inspections, and overseeing the manufacturing process of drugs which are manufactured by the respective state units and which are manufactured and marketed in those particular states. So that is all from my side. I thank you very much for attending this particular class, which was focused on the CDSCO. And this is my contact number and my email IDs, and you can always contact me for any further information. Thank you once again for joining this particular class on the Central Drug Standard Control Organization, CDSCO, and the drug regulatory authorities of various states. Thank you very much. This is Dr. Sukhwant Singh, Professor, SIRT-Pharmacy, Sanjeev Agrawal, Global Education University, Bhopal.